a difficult time. So, alright, so let's start by talking about some things that I think we can agree on, such as your mental and emotional issues. You have unresolved anger issues, correct?
Yeah, so you take Adderall for it. It's a generic.
Yes, and so to keep your anger in check, you take a generic version of Adderall 3 times a day. Is that right?
Or I'm supposed to be.
So you do take this medication 3 times a day, correct? Your psychiatrist told you to take it 3 times a day?
Yeah.
And you often refer to these as your good Dakota pills, don't you?
Yeah, because they give me more of a choice field to choose how I want to be.
And without these pills, you become bad Dakota, don't you?
Yeah, it's harder for me to have a choice, and I lose control more on attention.
And as bad Dakota, you often do things without thinking them all the way through, is that right?
Yeah, I don't think very much. Sorry.
And occasionally, you decide not to take your medication because you feel more real when you're not on it, correct?
Yeah, that is true.
But just to be clear, these pills were prescribed for you by your psychiatrist, weren't they?
I'm a psychiatrist. Is that the person who's at the school or my doctor?
That would be the medical doctor, Mr. Allen, the one who can prescribe medication for you.
Yeah.
But even when you're on your medication, you occasionally pretend to be bad Dakota just to do crazy things, is that right?
Yeah, that's my friend.
And you often follow these episodes by telling the school psychologist that you hadn't taken your medication, even though you had, correct?
Yeah, that's only when I'm on my medication, yes.
So you do lie to your school psychologist and say you had not taken your pills, even though you had in these
Yeah,
circumstances?
but I don't really lie when I have taken my medication, because I have no choice.
So, Mr. Allen, is that a yes?
Yeah.
Thank you. And you consider these fake bad Dakota episodes to be a sport to you and your friends, don't you?
Well, the mischief that we cause. The episode is the mischief.
Yes, and you would consider that a sport, wouldn't you?
I'm not bad Dakota quite when I'm doing that. I have my medication. It's just a sport.
Mr. Allen, I'm
So,
simply asking if you and your friends consider these episodes to be a sport to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And sometimes you do crazy things just to impress Quinn and the other Invisibles, don't you?
Yeah.
And speaking of Quinn, she often influences you too much, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Now, aside from the Invisibles, you don't really have any other friends, do you?
No, not outside that group.
And you feel like a ghost when you're walking through your school hallways, don't you?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character testimony.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you said in your statement that you wanted people to pay more attention to you, didn't you?
When did I say that? When I confessed? That I just didn't pay
Mr. Allen,
attention to me?
in your statement, you
Yes.
do say that you want more people to pay more attention to you.
Sorry about that. I did say I don't confess, but I wasn't for that.
And the crazy things that you do with the Invisibles, or to impress them, would help to earn you some more attention, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Alright, now let's discuss the case at hand. Detective Sam O'Leary came to your house to speak with you about the fighter, correct?
Yes.
And your father gave Detective O'Leary permission to conduct this interview, didn't he?
Yeah. It was more like an interrogation.
But your father gave his consent, that's all I'm asking.
I'm sorry about that. Yes.
But your own father followed his consent by saying, and I quote, "I'm so done dealing with your screw-ups. Just call me if you need a ride home." Didn't he?
Yeah. You didn't get much sleep last night.
I move to strike that answer as irrelevant to the question.
So stricken.
Thank you. And you were then taken to the front seat of Detective O'Leary's police car, correct?
Yeah.
And this car did not have a screen between the front and back seats, did it?
Mm-hmm. It didn't look like a police car.
So it wasn't a regular cop car then, was it?
Oh no, it was more like undercover one.
But not a regular cop car.
It wasn't a regular cop car.
And you were not placed in handcuffs, were you?
No.
And the detectives never tried to take away your cell phone, did they?
They didn't.
So you had your cell phone on you for the entire day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the detectives never told you that you couldn't use it, did they?
They didn't tell us we couldn't use it.
Mr. Allen, you never asked to go home, did you?
No, I didn't ask because I didn't think it would make a difference if they're taking us around.
Objection, Your Honor, I merely asked, I moved to strike this answer is non-responsive. I simply asked if he asked to go home, not the reason behind.
I know, but overall.
But the detective never told you that you couldn't leave, right?
They didn't tell us, but I didn't think they would let us either.
But they never told you you couldn't leave, and you never asked to leave. Am I correct, Mr. Allen?
Yeah.
And the detectives even took both you and Quinn to a fast food restaurant for lunch, didn't they?
And to use the bathroom.
Now, Mr. Allen, this interview was not the first time that you were questioned by Detective O'Leary, was it?
Oh no, it was, yeah, it was questioned before.
So then you had seen the detective's interview tactics prior to this interview, correct?
Yeah, I did, but that wasn't that yet. It was for the artwork that me and the Wolves painted on the side of that maintenance building.
So you had seen the detective's interview tactics before, correct?
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to talk about your actual confession. You said to Detective O'Leary, and I quote, "I started it. I never meant to kill anyone. I just wanted them to pay attention to me." Correct?
You know who I was speaking of?
I'm sorry, could you speak up?
Yeah, but you know who I was speaking of?
Mr. Allen, I'm simply asking if you said these words, didn't you?
I did say those words.
And when your father arrived, you confessed once again by saying, and I quote, "I did it, I did it, I did it. I'm sorry, Daddy, I'm so sorry, it's not your fault." Right?
Yes.
And it wasn't until after both confessions that you were taken to the police station's jail and placed under arrest. Is that right?
Well, they put me in handcuffs before I got back into the car again,
But after your confessions.
after the confessions.
So it wasn't until after both of your confessions that you were handcuffed and taken to the police station's jail and placed under arrest. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
You correct?
Yes, sir.